Most people know that money is an emotional topic, but not many of them realize that that is the reason why they frequently end up making bad decisions. In the book The Psychology of Money, Morgan Housel sheds all the light we need to learn how to avoid those emotional traps. In this video, I will share the 6 main lessons I learned, and hopefully by the end of the video, you will be one step ahead of your emotions. Let's get started. Lesson number 1: Wealth is what you don't see. Morgan tells a story about a man that arrived in a great car to the hotel he worked in. He drove a Porsche. For his surprise, 1 week later, the same man showed up in an old car. It turns out that man had a big debt in order to pay for the car, and when he ran into financial problems, he had to sell it. This man clearly wanted to look rich instead of wanting to be rich. Let's see the difference. We usually judge people's wealth by what we see. When we see someone in a great car, like the man in the story, we assume they are rich. But the only thing we actually know is that that person has less $100,000 to spend. If that same person would keep the money and drive a regular car instead, she would have $100,000 more. And having money that we can use is what makes us rich. There is nothing wrong with wanting an expensive car or other luxuries if you can afford it. But if what you most desire is to buy things, maybe what you want is not to be rich, but to look rich. And spending money to show people how much money you have is the fastest way to have less money. Lesson number 2: Money buys freedom. We have all heard the expression, money doesn't buy happiness. And while we may agree or disagree with it, I think we can all agree that money can buy something far more precious. And that is the ability to control how we spend our time. More than our salary, more than the prestige of our job, to do what we want, when we want to, with the people we want, is one of the things that brings the biggest happiness. And that's a privilege we can all have if we are wealthy enough. But that is not the only thing money can buy. It can also buy us options. People who live paycheck to paycheck can't afford skipping a few days of work for being sick, because it may mean not having enough money to pay the bills. People who have low savings don't have much time to look for a new job in case they get fired, and may end up with a stressful job that they don't like. Those who have 6 months of savings are not afraid of their boss because they know they won't be ruined if they take some time to look for another job. And those who have even more can afford being in a job with lower pay but flexible hours. Until a certain amount, having money saved gives us more and better options, and therefore more control over our life. Lesson number 3: Being reasonable is more important than being rational. From all the lessons in the book, this, in my opinion, is the most important one. When making financial decisions, we often look for the option we believe will bring the best results, when instead we should look for the one that lets us sleep better at night. Let me explain. My friend Jack wants to start investing and he has $5,000 for that. It is a huge sum of money for him, but he is confident that it will go well, and if he loses, he won't be needing that money anyway. The market has been growing these past months, so he thinks it's the right time. He now faces 2 options. Option number 1, he puts it all in and waits for the market to grow. Option number 2, he puts $500 each month during 10 months. Option number 1 seems more appealing. He believes the market will grow quickly, so it makes no sense to lose the opportunity. And that's what he does. A week later, the market crashed. Jack has been panicking for a few days and can't even look at the app. He later decides to get out and loses half of it. A few years later, Jack decides to try again. This time he chooses option number 2. On the first month, he buys $500. A month later, the market crashed. He is losing a third of what he invested already. But he is not worried. He still has money left, so he buys $500 more. When the market goes up, he is profiting. But when the market goes down, he is buying more for a cheaper price. In his mind, it is a win-win situation. He knows he is not making the biggest profits he can, but now he sleeps like a baby, and that is far more important. Lesson number 4: Nothing is free. Every investment we do has a hidden price, And no, it is not a monetary price as you might expect. It is an emotional one, like fear, doubt, or stress. The problem is that most of the times we are not aware of it until it is time to pay. So, instead of looking at it as a fee that we need to pay in order to have the benefit, we feel like we are given a fine and we hate it. The solution is to learn for each investment what is the fee that we are supposed to pay, and when it comes, be willing to pay it. Let me share an example. I have a friend, Matt, who bought a Bitcoin some years ago for $7.5 thousand. Matt believed in the project and decided to invest with a huge sum of his money. He was pretty happy with his choice in the beginning because Bitcoin doubled to $15,000. However, a few months later it dropped for a whole year, reaching the bottom around $2.5 thousand. Matt suffered. Each time he went to the app checking Bitcoin's price, he cried inside. Each time it dropped 10%, his legs shake. Matt questioned several times his choices and if he should sell what he had left. But he held, and 3 years later Bitcoin slowly recovered and reached a new record of $55,000, bringing a new confidence to Matt's face. It now looks easy, he just had to buy it and wait. But Matt's success had a huge emotional price, which Matt wasn't expecting. When investing, always remember that there is a price to pay. Take it as a fee and not as a fine. Lesson number 5. Play your game. Let's meet two investors. The first one is a father, has a fine job and is looking for a way to apply his savings and generate wealth in the next years. We will call him the long-term investor. On the right side we have a man in his mid-20s. He just started working and has a lot of free time to look at markets. He likes to do some daily trading to get a few extra bucks. We will call him the short-term investor. The short-term investor loves stocks that are growing. He usually makes a quick profit by buying and some hours later selling on a higher price. The long-term investor likes companies that he believes will be great in the future. And it happens many times that those companies are the same that the short-term investor just invested in. And because both investors got in, the trend continues, attracting more and more people until one day it collapses. The short-term investor gets in and gets out before the crash, so he's fine. But the long-term investor is not planning to sell soon, and so he takes the hit. This happens in real life all the time. Trending stocks attract more and more day traders that make the price rocket. Mid and long-term investors are attracted to that success and do not see that other investors are playing a different game than they are. And when the crash happens, they regret it. But they didn't necessarily make a mistake. In the long run, they will probably profit. But in the short run, they are taking an emotional hit, the fine we talked about in the previous lesson. So be careful from whom you are taking advice, because they may not be playing the same game as you are. Lesson number 6. Room for Rehorn. A friend of mine, Rick, was never cautious with his money. He always spent his paycheck on trips and beer and never cared about saving money. When Bitcoin started to rise, he invested $1,000 in it. A few years passed and Bitcoin had a hard time, but now it was 5 times bigger than before. One day I encountered him and asked about his investment. He should be making great profit by now. But he said that he had to sell it at half of the price because he needed to buy a motorcycle. Rick could have now 5 times more, but because he didn't have any savings, he had to sell his investment when it wasn't convenient. The world is unpredictable, so you should always plan with room for error. If you think a 6-month emergency fund is enough, why not make it 9, just in case? If you are buying a house in 2 years, put aside 20% more every month. The price you are expecting to pay might be higher, so if you have the amount you need earlier, great. If not, you will be glad you saved a little extra. To avoid frustration, you should always have a safety margin. These were only 6 from 20 interesting lessons from the book, so if you want to learn more, I totally recommend you reading it. It's very recent and easy to read.